what you want to do really is to say, okay, I want that data, but I want to bring it up to be able to access it when I design the model for how I want to run the business. Here's all the data I need. So you come up with a first cut view of, okay, here's all the data I need to be able to execute this vision I have for, call it CPQ.
So I've been excited about this conversation, Rick. Number one, because you have one of my favorite people that work for you inside of Viax, Brian Deal. And I met Brian years ago in the tundra of North Dakota, if I remember correctly. It was like -3 degrees that day when I met Brian for the first time. But that was 15 years ago, probably. So you have one of my favorite people. And then all the things you guys have been talking to us about, what you're doing at Viax. I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think you're doing something really unique, and I really want to be able to probe into this. But I want to start with your kind of personal journey, Rick. How did you end up in this world of B2B commerce that we're in today and Viax? What was your kind of path into the company?
Well, my first half of my career was mainly around consulting. So partner at Deloitte, Accenture, doing a lot of strategy operations. I avoided software like the plague, so I just wasn't in IT. And then I started migrating over to where I started thinking about software and starting to do some significant things there. And really the lesson for me was you can do a lot of consulting and have an impact, but it doesn't necessarily last. And the first experience I had around something that lasted was when I helped the founders redesign their entire store concept at Home Depot. Where the adjacencies are, where the doors are, what kind of racking to use, how to flow people and product and the people that are stocking the shelves through the store. And that model still exists today, the exact way we designed it, several decades ago. And then as I moved into the software space, I was like, this is something where I can really have a lasting impact and replicate the kind of ideas that you have in your head you want to see spread around the world a bit. And so the first time I actually went into the software world was I was running this little AI startup called InfoLens out of MIT. They were out of funding, they couldn't pay me much of anything, and yet it was the most fascinating time I ever had to learn about control theory, combinatorial optimization, affinity clusters, how to segment customers in a fundamentally different way using kind of atomic level data. And I came up with a concept at the time of boundaryless retailing. And I left before I really fulfilled that vision and ended up going to SAP and ran their global retail and wholesale practice there for several years. And that started me on my journey. So I've gone on a journey from that to PIM, to POS with NCR, to no-code modeling, lots of different things. And then I ended up at Hybris as well, where you mentioned Brian Deal. He and I worked together on B2B. And I came up with the OmniCommerce imperative, which is around bringing physical, digital, and services together on both a local and global scale. And the idea is that as you think about e-commerce, it's really, even today, it's only about a quarter, whether it's B2B or whether it's even retail and B2C, it's only a quarter of what's really addressed. And with the B2B markets being so big, and so many other things unaddressed. So you have, physical orders, you have call centers, you have assisted selling, you have all sorts of different ways that you connect now with the customers, but it's not part of the natural e-commerce layer of application that's going to address those kinds of things. So you end up getting very complicated customizations on one end or another. Either it's the ERP end trying to absorb some of these capabilities, or it's on the e-commerce end trying to build some of this out, but they really don't have the end-to-end schema to really be able to bring all the data and processes together. And so when the OmniCommerce thing didn't exactly go forward either, because it was right at the time of the acquisition by SAP, and how acquisitions go. You end up going in a bit of a different direction, probably more towards CX was sort of the model at the time. And so I've been pursuing this dream really for about 20 years to really bring all of this together, bring all the different capabilities that kind of fill the bridge, between ERP and commerce in dealing with the physical, digital, and services. And then now we have even a more robust way of dealing with things with AI and AR, where you can bring a much more visual, much more personalized, much more customized, really, I think about it in terms of B2B experience and be able to exercise these processes across the landscape, and both within a company as well as B2B2C, interoperability across different companies. And that's how I ended up talking to Brian, as it turned out, a little over.
Brian, is Brian the one that
he called
made the
me.
first introduction?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
He called me and said, "Hey, take a look at what these guys are doing." And I've been known sometimes as with the pen, Redline Rick, in terms of. I was very blunt in terms of, hey, you guys are not expressing. I'm hearing a lot of great stuff in your technology, but you're not expressing it in a way that I can absorb it, and probably maybe not some of the other customers or prospects you have out there. And then after a few more sessions, you're kind of stuck in the idea of, hey, there's something here, and I need to keep digging, figuring out what it is. And then we started doing advisory, and then pretty soon, I'm all in. Because what I realized was, with this technology, and the way they have their schema designed, where you can get any of this data you need, and then the deployment of it, you can put these models on top of it, and really construct an end-to-end capability that I hadn't really seen anywhere else. And even all of the various things I've seen in terms of AI, where they're trying to go after data and try to reimagine and have the autonomous enterprise or whatever it might be, they don't have the replicability, the repeatability of what our platform can do, because we have all the processes, we have all the data you can extract, but only that data, we try to focus only on that data that really is needed to manage something that's a really high value end-to-end capability for the company. And so we think about it, maybe like CPQ. There's lots of CPQ only kinds of engines out there. But what we do is bring that CPQ into pricing, into OMS, into commerce, to where you can string it together end to end and access all the different data that you need from the different subsystems, and bring that single view of commerce that really we talked about at OmniCommerce, a dozen years ago when I wrote that paper. Bring that all together under that single view. And so once you bring and elevate this information, the data, in what I'm calling a digital clean room, you're able to construct whatever you want. It's really, you design your own differentiation, and it's built around the enterprise model, the business model you want to do to compete. So you're designing that with our no-code contextual modeling. We have all the context needed there to really be able to construct not only the kind of processes you want to turn processes into profits in the execution platform that we have, but as you start thinking about AI and the need for context and feeding AI algorithms, machine learning, agentic AI, etc., we are the ones that can get that data from beginning to end, including the feedback loop that grabs the data from the various selling points, touch points that you might have, and bring it back, and you can start doing a test and learn kind of approach. You can feed the data into a machine learning algorithm. And it doesn't have to be what we create in terms of the AI tooling. It can be plug and play. It can be our own stuff. We can layer conversational AI on top of the models that we already have to make it easier to access for people. So there's just so much potential that we have because we can do this end to end, and we can focus in on specific capabilities. So as some of the people at Viax know, I'm not a fan of talking about use cases, because I tend to think of use cases, particularly as people have done it in the AI world or in citizen developers with no code, tend to be very departmental focused. And people talk about, oh, let's create a use case here, and let's fail fast, and then we'll learn something. And we think about it in terms of, well, let's succeed faster. Let's tackle these things end to end, but have a clear view. We have the right data. You're going to design with us as co-innovation, design the right processes, and then we're going to make sure that it's going to turn into profits so we can measure the impact once you put this new capability into place. And so this outcome focus is also something that we're sort of obsessing over, because there's been so many technologies that people introduce where they have a lot of great business cases that identify here's the value, but at the end of it, do you really ever know if you've captured the value or not? So those are some of the things that really get me excited about what this platform can do, and do it in a replicatable manner. And customers are already seeing it. I call it iterate to innovate. And some of our customers have found that. They'll start in one area, get that solved, either transport that same capability to another division, or just keep adding on to the capabilities that they've solved. And it tends to be, 3 times faster at least. And it tends to be, depending on who the competition is, which is really more internal customization or one of the major SIs working with a major ERP, those projects can be as much as 8 to 10 times as expensive as what we're doing, and we get the benefit there in a third of the time.
I haven't written as many notes as I've written in the first 5 minutes of this. I've got so many things we need to go back on. First of all, the OmniCommerce imperative that you wrote, now the OmniCommerce 2.0, you mentioned digital clean rooms, process to profits, no use cases, iterate to innovate. So we've got a bunch to circle back on. So give me a second, because I want to order this correct. Before I do, I want you to know that. So, benefit of working in this industry for a long time is when you meet someone new. We had never met before until we met a few weeks ago in your role there at Viax, and so we'd never met before, and so immediately I turned and sent this out to a friend and said, "Hey, Rick Chavie, working with a partner of ours, Viax, met him for the first time yesterday. What's your take on him? Are you close?" Just doing some G2. I just want to see who's legitimate, right? And he says, "Hey, Justin, Rick is a close friend of mine. Just talked to him a few days ago. He's a very intelligent and creative dude. And this guy doesn't say dude unless he's a friend." So that was Carrie Young, who is your a good friend.
Good friend.
It's nice to hear other people with G2 in the background, and when you're getting background on someone, say nice things about you. That's why I wanted to bring it up. Can we start with, so the OmniCommerce imperative, when did you write that? How long ago did you write that?
2013. About
2013, okay.
It got published
12 years
about
ago.
a week before SAP announced the acquisition of Hybris.
Okay.
It ended up being the most downloaded paper that Hybris ever had, as it turned out.
Was it really?
When I came out with the idea of this OmniCommerce imperative, I Googled the references to the word OmniCommerce, because I was very much insistent that, hey, don't think of channels. Yes, you got to execute within channels, but don't think of channels, because the experiences and preferences of customers are not relying on that channel. And there's not like a specific journey. You go from here, point A to B to C. I mean, in today's world, you get information from a lot of different points. And so when I pushed that out there were only 2 references in all of Google to the word OmniCommerce. And then a year later, after the acquisition of SAP, a year later, there were 2 million references, and people were changing their titles to that OmniCommerce, and dropping the channel. Even though I know omnichannel became the thing going forward.
Yeah.
But it really still kind of speaks more to an e-commerce orientation, whereas I was really looking to get the physical as well as the digital, other ways of interacting, assisted selling through sales reps that doesn't often get quite captured by e-commerce platforms.
Based off of that, so I think one interesting thing as you were talking that I thought of was, most commerce, e-commerce and commerce combined, especially in digital, is more template based. You made a reference that you said you design commerce around process, the process that the company wants to deploy for their customers, for their people, however it might be.
Right.
Yet so much of commerce today is like templated, like it's its own. Like we almost abandon the process for the customer, and we abandon the process for the company, and we just say this is what commerce is supposed to look like. And that's always struck me as like not the right way to go about this. How do you, I think that's what you're discussing in OmniCommerce 2.0. Kind of walk me through the progression from the OmniCommerce imperative to 2.0 that you guys are talking about now.
I think with the OmniCommerce 2.0, number one, there are a lot of other tools and capabilities and partnerships we'll be announcing as well to infuse into what we're calling OmniCommerce. But the thing that really differentiates what we're looking at now is the ability to put things in context at a massive scale. So I call it mass custom commerce. Because one of the things that these templates, one of these things that these templates that you're talking about force you into doing it the way that somebody else thought you should do it. And that applies whether you're dealing with ERPs, whether you're dealing with a CPQ, a PIM, a commerce platform. They all want you to structure things a certain way. And a lot of times you have a lot more capabilities than you even need or want. And what we say is, no. It's not exactly a blank sheet of paper, although it can be. We've got certain capabilities that we've built out as sort of a starting point, but we let you model with the no-code contextual modeling the way you want to run your business to compete against other companies. So you're not being forced to look like everybody else. It's one of the criticisms I kind of have around the thinking around LLMs. They're going to solve your content that you use for commerce. It's like, well, everybody else has got the same LLM. So, okay, you might be able to do a little better question toward it, but you kind of get a commoditization of content. And then the front end on commerce tends to be kind of a commoditized thing. But if we can go to a more mass custom commerce approach, where I can create customized views into that product catalog that relate to that specific customer in that segment, in that location, and that maybe they're in a sub-segment of multifamily homes that is really just dealing with high-rise, as opposed to, suburban multifamily homes, and you're trying to do an MRO like one of our clients is doing in a marketplace. Well, we construct a marketplace specific for that opportunity, but you don't need a marketplace that covers thousands and thousands of categories of product. You build it specifically for that particular company to be able to onboard the Grangers and other suppliers onto a platform. So you make it very specific. And I think of it even like Microsoft Word. With Microsoft Word, you have a lot of capabilities. Microsoft PowerPoint or any of the other templates that are out there. How much of that do you actually use? Well, you use about that much, right? It's the same thing with this approach, is design it for the things that are actually going to make you money and do it the way you need to compete, which ends up being much more customized to individual customers, to individual industry sectors, customized to the way that you actually manufacture. If you're doing CPQ and you only manufacture 20 different styles of a particular product, it doesn't matter that you have like some other model that'll let you do 1,000 different versions of that. You need to look at it the way that you're thinking of your business and where you can actually make money. And so that's what we really look at. And the idea also is we want to be able to track, I know it's kind of a concept that not a lot of people like to get into, but in terms of product cost accounting, because I was an accounting major too, among other things, alongside my German major. But if you can get direct product profitability, including as something flows through the pipeline, you get some of the logistics costs embedded, and you don't have to be 100% accurate. But if you can actually get that, once you have that tagging along with the product, and you can sort that by customer, you can sort it by region, you can sort it by sales region, you can sort it by, this category of products is making this amount of money in this part of the country, but it's losing money in another country. Once you can be able to track that kind of thing, you can really think much more intelligently about the assortments. But typically, a marketing person is just promoting to drive revenue, not thinking as much about the margin. The product manager or merchant is thinking about the margins, but everybody has their own kind of view of things. But if you can get this consolidated view of profitability, a single view of profitability, that's end-to-end and built on this atomic level data that I talked about early on with this sort of boundaryless concept when I was running this little AI company, that still informs me in terms of a lot of things you'll see on our website, really tries to identify how you can get at the most granular level of information, and once you have that, you can build up the analytics any way you want to. And our schema allows you to build whatever kind of digital cockpit you want on that data and look at whatever kind of queries you want to have into that information.
Does that mean also giving ERP capability, like building on top of the ERP more capabilities that the ERP can't do today? Or is that more front end capabilities, or both? Like, how do you guys, so a lot of these custom processes are built into the ERP, yet it's pretty expensive to continue to build those into the ERP. A lot of these processes aren't built into commerce because it's kind of fragmented from the ERP. Do you guys do you guys then sit between those two, and do you also build kind of ERP-like capabilities in the middle of that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, we think of that like a digital bridge between the two. Thinking of commerce generally, not just the e-commerce side of it. To a certain degree, because of the fact that ERP covers the landscape, covers industries, 20 or 30 different industries, it covers lots of capabilities of the enterprise. We're a little bit of like a digital ERP for the AI era to an extent. But we don't stop at the ERP, because there's all these other systems we mentioned in between: CPQ, OMS, logistics capabilities, CRM. Our schema covers all of those different things. And the opportunity, though, is that we see to really accelerate value is a bit more focused on the front end in terms of the things that drive top line revenue, margin, inventory allocation and priorities, new product introductions, customizing for major customers that you have. So you're giving them like the right product offering, whether it's delivered digitally or whether it's delivered, from a physical standpoint. But that ability to elevate and not be kind of trapped by the systems that typically in ERP, they're not ready for real time. And you need to perform it. You need people to be able to access it instantly. And so we can extract the data we need to operationalize those kind of capabilities to make it performant. So we do extract from the ERP. We're not trying to replicate that structure necessarily, but inevitably we do end up replacing, whether it's ERP or whether it's e-commerce end, we end up replacing the customizations that have been done. Like SAP talks about going to a clean core and then moving the customizations over to one side. And you have the same thing on e-commerce, where they've tried to solve some of these riddles of OmniCommerce. There's a lot of technical debt sitting out there. So rather than even using AI to create new code to replace that technical debt, we're saying, no, just build this no-code modeling, grab the data through our schema to be able to present that information and to model how you want to run the business, and retire any of that technical debt really by building new capabilities. And then over time, you can replace things, but without having to recode it or refactor it.
What are some of just illustrations of that or examples of that on the customer side?
Well, from the customer side, there's a number of different things. One of our customers, a major publisher, has a very complicated subscription model, authorship model, funding model for writers, and all the way through to the front end. And so with all of that complexity, there wasn't any standard template to even address the things that they were trying to do. So you end up relying on spreadsheets, you end up relying on people figuring out different ways to execute the processes. But with our rich ability to combine, kind of a combinatorial joining of elements to position these subscriptions and authorizations from beginning to end, from the time they're authorized till somebody writes something, till they consume the funds, to the time they get it posted on a website for consumption, we're able to go all the way to the front end and have both like the B2C side as well as the more B2B, dealing with universities. And we're actually able to replace the front end. They put a little cart and things on the front end, but we replaced, one of the e-commerce players in that sense. I mean, we're not targeting to replace the front end, but we can go really from the very beginning to the very end. Another example is, we can do things like payment portals. You have a lot of complexity in international payments around the world and trying to collect and adapt to the different countries, and you got different authorizations, and we're able to manage that kind of complexity. Another thing is we've got a couple of customers in the medtech field, and in medtech you have a lot of complexity around, is this product authorized for this particular customer in this particular location in this particular country? And with existing ERP, it's not able to really understand that. It doesn't have that multi-domain context to be able to say, for Belgium, they haven't authorized this particular medical device in that country, so we can't sell it. But if the system doesn't know that you can't sell it, then you might end up selling it, have some issues. And there's no way to really deal with that without kind of a multi-domain approach of country, regulation, location, who you're selling it to, because it might be different if it's selling it to a surgical hospital versus just a regular clinic. Maybe one has access, one doesn't. So that kind of combination of things. And oh, by the way, our shipping costs to send it to Europe, if we're making it here, maybe we have to charge a higher price, and maybe we skinny down the assortment for things we're exporting, and we have a different assortment for domestic market. All of those kind of considerations are very hard to model in an ERP, and very hard to model on the e-commerce side, which is just trying to, place the order.
Yeah.
So the more complex it is, the more we like it, because it's really bringing value that takes advantage of data that is there, but then brings it in a digital clean room, as I was talking earlier, that lets them execute at a much higher level, much more effectively and efficiently. And then the final one I would give you is, one of the things in the medtech field, in a lot of other manufacturing spaces, including CPG, is certain companies tend to grow by acquisitions. And so they're going to add a new product line, add a new territory that has a manufacturing plant. They're going to add some new capabilities, including services that they might not have had before they started acquiring. And what happens is you end up with maybe 5, 10, 15 different ERP systems, and different e-commerce systems, and different CPQ, and different pricing systems. So how do you consolidate all of that? And the typical answer is, well, let's put it all on the ERP and we'll consolidate that, and then we'll start thinking about how we make money with all these different acquisitions in a kind of cohesive way. What we do is, in essence, kind of build a layer on top of all of that, extract the layer of data that you need, set up the processes you need, design your differentiation that you need the way you want it, as though you had one entity. And then once you're able to do that, you have a single view of commerce execution. Single view of pricing, single view of, from a customer perspective, they get a single view of what you really have in terms of your offering. So they can't play, we have 2 plants manufacturing this, but they're on 2 different ERPs, so you have 2 different pricings for me, so I can play them against one another. No, it goes away. You have one face to the customer. And then that certainly simplifies, from a customer standpoint, makes it much easier for you to do business with them. And then also makes it much more intelligent in terms of, what should my price be? And I can get feedback on that. I can test different prices in regions, but I'm doing it at a global level, not at 18 at a time, and trying to distill that. No matter how much AI you may throw at it, how much data you put in the data lake, it's not going to understand the context of, how did I actually price that? How is this customer different than that? How is this manufacturing policies for shipping stuff to customers? How are they dealing with this information? Very hard to extract the noise and get down to the signal.
So what I'm hearing is, with this complexity, often the complexity can't be done in one system or another, or sometimes they're probably looking, do we need to replace this system to handle this complexity that we have, which introduces another significant event inside the company. I mean, if especially if you're looking at ERP, I mean, ERP and commerce are major rip and replaces if you have to do that. And so with that complexity, what you guys are able to do is say, we can model that complexity in our platform, no code platform, that allows you to model that and interact with all of these other systems, so that you're not having to rip and replace these. You're able to append to them and make them more robust.
That's exactly right. And we use very deliberately the word master complexity. You see a lot of people saying, "Oh, we're going to simplify things." And yeah, for the customer, we're trying to simplify for sure, and to make it more customized to them. But we're not trying to dismiss the fact that there is a lot of complexity there. It's going to be there whether you try to simplify it or not. It's going to stay there. But if you can master that within our platform, and then present the different alternatives, I can present a different assortment and different pricing and different ways of contracting with different customers, present a different view to them from one to another, because we have all this source data and source ways of sorting it out. We can give that more, I call it market experience. So a lot of people want to do the CX, customer experience, individualization, personalization, and be able to, you know what you had for breakfast, and that leads into what you like for lunch, which leads you into why you're buying, this hardware tool versus that one somehow, through demographics and psychographics and all sorts of other things. We look at you are what you purchase, not your persona. We're not thinking of personas as being an approximation of an individual. What we want to be able to look at is, here's how we customize for that customer, maybe down to a role level. Like, if you've got somebody that's a purchasing agent that is buying for across the country versus somebody in a localized area, we're going to offer a different catalog or different view into the products in those particular cases. But we're looking at it at a market level and thinking that from a manufacturer's point of view in particular, unless they're going D2C, which is, kind of opens up more like, the personalization that a B2C player might have, a little closer to that. But from a market experience where we can really segment how we're going to be providing customers our products and services, we think it's at a bit of a higher level. And if you can solve that across your 18 plants or 18 ERPs and get to that level of experience, somewhere down the road you might get to the CX thing being really valuable. But we want to solve the hard problems first, and then you can always get more nuance later. But we think that's where the big profit's going to come from. For some companies, frankly, even global companies, that are still using spreadsheets, manual quotes on pieces of paper, telephone calls, all of that, if you can bring that into the fold and make that, a digitalized future for them, then you have such rich information to continue fine-tuning, including using AI with our closed loop ability to bring all that data back. And then you can use our algorithms that we create, you can feed it out to some other system, or we can create a new machine learning thing that takes like, okay, this is the right price for this region, for this customer set, for this country. You can continually refine, your processes around that, using AI as a feedback loop into that pricing decision. But first you got to get all the data. There's got to be quality, and we grab, the source information.
I really like what you said about often we do want to simplify the customer's experience, but often these companies they've built their company around their ability to deal with the complexity.
Right.
And I love how you say master the complexity, I think is what you said, master that complexity. That's often the competitive advantage or the moat around their company, is their ability to deal with the complexity, yet so often systems can't deal with that complexity because it's nuanced for their industry or the problems that they're trying to address.
And you don't want, as you were talking about earlier, you don't want the system to dictate how you need to manage your business.
Mm-hmm.
You're competing really on business models now, with AI and LLMs and all the different things that open up new alternatives for how you compete. It still comes back to, I'm competing on a business model, and these tools help me, but I've got to be able to do it in a repeated manner. So I've got to be able to do it today, tomorrow, next day, continuously cycle it through. We're not just going in with whatever tooling, AI tooling or consulting insights, and saying, okay, here's a big opportunity. You can get $50 million or $100 million benefit if you do these three things based on our recommendations, throwing an AI tool at it. And it's like, okay, but now we've got to get the people. We've got to make sure those processes are baked. We've got to make sure that they don't kind of go off the rails, a month later. And then the ability to continuously learn, like, are we abiding by what those recommendations were? Then ultimately those recommendations probably have to change in a few months, given the pace of change in the markets. New competitor comes in, new online competitor comes in. You've got to be able to incorporate that kind of thing in a continuous learning, because history is becoming in some ways less important because of the continuous changes. So it still informs a lot of what we do in terms of competing. But given the changes, and if someone comes up with a great new capability, in their technology side of things, and they're able to get to market faster,
mm-hmm.
new product introductions, and they're able to tune those new products to the clients much better than I can, suddenly I'm losing sales, and I'm like, well, what's happening? So I got to start bringing even external data. Our focus initially has been on the internal enterprise data, and setting up a MCP server, that can go out and feed information, in terms of agentic AI and using of LLMs. So like everybody else, everybody can have one of those. But the idea of how do I use that to really compete at scale, for coming from the CEO or the head of a business unit, they've got to really think strategically about how they're going to compete, and we can translate that strategy into how they want to use the modeling to be able to design the processes to turn it into profits.
You mentioned the word digital clean room a couple times. Would you explain what that is?
Well, basically, you've got all the data sitting there in a lot of these subsystems, right? Whether it's the CPQ or the PIM or the CRM or the OMS or the ERP or the e-commerce, you have all the data sitting there. But what you want to do really is to say, okay, I want that data, but I want to bring it up to be able to access it when I design the model for how I want to run the business. Here's all the data I need. So you come up with a first cut view of, okay, here's all the data I need to be able to execute this vision I have for, call it CPQ, and the complex pricing that goes with it, and the OMS that goes with that. So you have a view of that data, and now you have it accessible, in the database, and then you model the processes on top of that to create how I actually want to run the business. So in that sense, it's clean because it came from the source. You can vet it. It's not like just dumping a bunch of data in a data lake that you're not really sure where it came from or whether it's accurate or if it came from spreadsheets. You're going to the source systems, and by having that kind of quality data from the start, when you design the processes on top of that and you make the decisions using that data, you've got a much better chance of success. I've always liked to think that the best AI algorithm with lousy data is not nearly as good as having off-the-shelf algorithm with great data.
Yeah, that's true. We've built just in a small way our own, knowledge base and LLMs, and just kind of basic LLM on top of our amazing library of content produces incredible assets. And I can see where you say that. Talk about, Rick, talk about when you're interacting with your customers. How are customers approaching you? Like when does a customer approach you? Like at what state are they in? I can imagine a couple scenarios that I've heard, at least, customers approaching you. Hey, we want to replatform our commerce because it can't handle whatever it is, right? And so they approach you, and you're able to say, hey, there's a different way of doing that may not need to replatform. What's kind of the typical way customers are kind of realizing they need a company like yours?
Typically, it's been around the idea that there are gaps in what they can do today. They've got these gaps in their systems, whether it's due to manual or spreadsheets or small subsystems that were created using custom code, but it's not scaling for the kind of business they want to run as a enterprise level company. And so when they find the frustrations that whether you're the business person in charge of, say, e-commerce or in charge of the overall commerce business of selling to customers, and you just find these gaps in your business, like, oh God, I can't quite construct the product I want for the right customer, or I've got given the way that our current PIM operates, I've got like 372 product catalogs because I've got different types of customers. I've got to create 372 of those. With our kind of combinatorial approach of managing these elements, you have one base set of information around your products, but you can tune it, by geography, by customer, by segment, by location, by whatever you want to segment it by, and you have one source of catalog, so a lot less replication and duplication of data that's sitting out there. And you can imagine if you have lots of different catalogs and then trying to feed that into the e-commerce, how do I manage the pricing? And, oh, by the way, we've got contracts with different people. I've got to apply their discount because they've reached a volume threshold. And oh, by the way, I'm giving a promotion from the marketing department for Southeast USA. Oh, how do I fit that into this pricing? It doesn't quite capture that. The e-commerce system doesn't have the wherewithal to really understand all of these different factors. So you end up with this multi-domain argument of like, well, I've got to have this multi-domain way of context of having information in order to deal with some of those kind of complexities. And that's where we're seeing companies in particular responding to is as you say, a bit from the commerce point of view, not necessarily e-commerce, but commerce. The ERP side, people tend to be a bit more locked in, I would say, because of the complexity of the ERP systems that are out there. It's harder for them to envision, all this digitalization and how to move in that direction, other than at a major scale, where you change the entire enterprise to fit sort of a new digitalization or new AI model, and we've got our layers of technology you've got to abide by, and then you can operate, this highly agile AI can operate within, but we got to have 4 layers to plug it into before you can start really using it at scale. And we're like, well, okay, if you want to go down that path, great, no problem. We'll come in and target your top 3 highest opportunities that are going to make money now. And we want the highest value opportunities. We call it digital value added, in the sense that you can calculate whether it's sales, margin, less cost for inventory, holding. Calculate those highest, best use cases, complex as they may be, and say, we'll go after that while you're dealing with this whole transition to some new architecture in your ERP. And in the meantime, we'll contribute money that will contribute to your bottom line and top line. And by the way, maybe it'll even help pay for kind of the very large expenses to make one of those major enterprise transitions. And then once you get that, let's say you get it in place, we just change the pointers from the old systems to the new one. And you still have the capability, and you just move forward with it. So the rip and replace, we're not advocating that. We don't need that. You may decide it over time. You take pieces of capability you've replaced, and you say, we're just going to run with this. And then you have to decide, do I want to put it in my ERP down the road or something? Maybe not. But you can continue on your path with kind of the enterprise play if you want, to spend the major dollars to do that. And we're not proposing that we're going to take on general ledger, accounts payable, things like that. But, there are some significant capabilities, particularly on the demand side, as I said earlier. We're less focused right now. We can do it, and we have done, on the more logistics, warehousing kinds of things. We could model those kind of things, but, there are systems that do that quite effectively, and we're not as focused on that.
I think there's quite a few companies out there, at least on the e-commerce side, that are saying we outgrew our platform, and they're not saying outgrew it from a scale perspective, like it can't handle the transactions or the size of our business. The capabilities are outgrown, and what I'm hearing from you is that's perhaps they can just look at it a different way of appending their commerce with other technology that bridges the gap between ERP, CRM, CPQ, and commerce in a different way.
Right, and you get the ability, with all of our context that we can put into play, you get the ability to customize things. Mm-hmm. So as I said earlier, I don't like to use the word personalized, but in the B2B sector, I think it's more about customization, whether it's going from, a make to order, engineer to order, or whether it's just more customizing at a particular location. Here are the different catalogs that you want for that particular customer. Or you've got assisted selling, and you enable your sales reps to really tune it to this particular customer in a better way than you can do with a traditional kind of e-commerce platform. And so you're bringing the ability, which is where the pressure is coming from. I mean, the idea of mass customization is not new. I mean, people have written books about it 20, 30, probably longer years ago. I read some of them. But when you start thinking about it in terms of mass custom commerce, so the play of not just the production side of it, it's how do you express that in commerce? How do you market? How do you go to market with that? How do you leverage all the different touch points now, whether it's e-commerce, social, marketplaces? You've got to feed all these different touch points, which gets more complex than most e-commerce things can handle. For us, it's like out of the box. Maybe we know how to just go and connect those things together, and you can use the same base set of information and processes and decisions to be able to fulfill that and just tune it based on those. And so you're customizing for the particular touch point that you want to sell into, but it doesn't require you to create a bunch of custom code in the platform. Just use the no-code model and design it the way you want it.
Well, there's a couple things with that too. I think so many times a process for a customer or just a new capability you want to roll out is multi-domain, as you've said. And to expose that multi-domain in a commerce platform takes a lot of work. It's sometimes it's sync, like data syncs and stuff like that, which is just
Right.
really hard to maintain, right? So having that multi-domain data at your fingertips to be able to create process around, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Well, but because we're end to end, so we have essentially kind of built-in iPaaS kind of capabilities when we're going and grabbing this data. We got the process, the workflows, the ability to insert decisions at certain points. Because we're doing it end to end, suddenly it's like, well, you don't need to change all those systems that we're drawing information from. You don't need to change your front end on the e-commerce. You may create some personalized pages for, or adjust the pages for a particular customer, but you've got all the information right there to construct the order, and you're just feeding it into that to execute the order. So it makes it much more resilient in terms of changes in the future when you're changing different product categories, different regions, different types of customers. You may be adding services into the mix for a bundle with a product. All those kind of things can be fed into that front end, and not trying to make the front end have to like go all the way back upstream to the ERP to figure all this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, and you have things like like assisted selling is a great example where you also you don't want to have like a separate assisted selling app from commerce, and you want them sharing those process that you've brought up here, and how do you do that in a normal way without something like this? So I think we've described some of the problems and potential solutions here well. Rick, would you talk about specifically about what Viax is as a company then? Like, is it software? Is it services? Is it a mix of both? Like, when companies engage you, what are they engaging you for, and what are they buying?
Yeah, to describe that a bit, it's to think of some of the founders that came across, Larry Ramponi, Andrew Martin, Dennis Galavati. What they were frustrated with, and they've dealt with the e-commerce world, coming from Hybris, some of the challenges that couldn't quite be solved with the way that technology was designed 10, 15 years ago. And they wanted to be able to create a much more robust model that didn't have the constraints of forcing customers to be able to abide by the way that the design worked in the software, and wanted to free that up. And so when they started thinking about that and thinking about the schema of being able to cover this broad, comprehensive landscape of end-to-end commerce, from the ERP to commerce, and all the different systems in between, we think we have the most comprehensive and the broadest schema of anybody out there. And what that enables, in terms of this no-code contextual modeling that they built on top of it, is the ability to really create specific capabilities that really don't have any limit. It's like I was saying earlier, it's like introducing, for somebody that was using pen and paper and then introducing a PC with word processing. You can write any story you want. You could write any story you want with a pen and paper as well, but suddenly you have the tooling to be able to write that story or write your business design in a much more compelling way and at scale. And so some of the capabilities that our founder talks about a lot on the technology side of it, Larry, it's API first. So when we think about, well, how do I go get the data? Well, we're designed that way to grab the data. It's event driven. So you have that kind of architecture where everything is tracked. So if you want to think about the feedback loops I was talking about earlier, everything is tracked and traced. So if you want to feed that data somewhere and analyze it or use it for machine learning capability, you've got all the things that you need to be able to do that. And from the standpoint of being able to construct the modeling on top of it, obviously we do some coding to create those models, the no-code modeling. But that no-code modeling really has no limit in terms of the kinds of things you can model. And so we could become, if we wanted to be, like a full PIM. We could become a CRM. We could become a logistics engine, whatever we want it to be. But what we wanted to focus on, those things that are highest value for the customers that we're engaging in. And we wanted to have that end-to-end view. So you don't end up being in silos. And then if you're in a silo, what tends to happen is then you say, okay, well, let's productize what we've got. Let's make it more rigid. Let's make it more, okay, we're going to build out the 4,000 capabilities you need to be able to compete in the analyst report. And suddenly then you're constraining the customers more than really helping them because you're trying to map to a set of requirements that people think about. Whereas here, we're mapping more to the outcomes that you want to achieve with the platform.
If an analyst was putting you in a report, which report would they put you in?
They wouldn't. We've had conversations with analysts, and they said we've actually created a new category. And by being it, basically we're reverse engineering the way most people think. We start with what's the value, how do you go back and get the data, how do you model it to create the right process for that, and there's no direct competition to that. So you might say, well, what about some of the people that are, in the iPaaS kind of area? Well, they're just moving data around. Now they're going to try to do some things, but they don't have the underlying business logic that we do and the modeling around that to be able to take advantage of that data. They don't know when it's coming from all these different sources of data, the context of that in order to be able to do the modeling in the first place, to understand what that data means and how to be able to use that to make decisions and to build processes on top of. You might say RPA has some of these capabilities, but again, they don't have the no-code modeling, they don't have the business logic the way we structured it, and again, everybody's going to be pushing in an AI direction and have some flavor of that, but they're not there. We're not the e-commerce side with the cart. We're not as focused on the carts. We have partners that we work with, like Shopify, a great partner of ours, and we're continuing to do more things with them. But we're not trying to become just the front end glass and the cart and do those kinds of things, or even do some of that extreme personalization. We'll let people that have a lot of money that are focused on that, they can do that. And so from our point of view, the ability to be agile and to focus in on the particular opportunities at that particular customer and to leverage these capabilities in a modern technology that no one's seen deployed in the way that we're deploying it, and to reverse engineer back into the data you need to be able to produce these results, we think that's going to be the way to go in the future. And I think even the people that are, if you look at some of the language of people that are creating AI tooling, they're trying to describe that they can do the same thing. Oh, we're going to make the autonomous enterprise. We're going to just look at your data, find the context, and then we're going to layer all this governance and all that, and our AI agent will invent the governance to put on the top of it. Well, we already have the governance inbred, within our context of our modeling already, because we're even SOC 1 compliant in one case, where we're the source of master data for one of our customers, and we understand that kind of capability is needed. We're replicatable, so one day to the next, it can be consistent. And yet, and we're more deterministic in that sense, but we can plug AI capabilities into our platform and have a very dynamic capability, a learning capability, by feeding it the right data in and out, whether it's our model or somebody else's model. But we think of the governance then as, we can layer differential controls over the top of any AI that you want to plug in. So if it's just rule-based things, no problem. But at some point you get to where, well, the agent is saying, raise prices by 5%. Or cut prices by 20%. Maybe it had an objective function of sell the most you can possibly sell. Well, we know what the margins are, and we don't want to let it go below a certain level. So we'll say, no, we're going to constrain it to plus or minus 5%. We'll let the agent do its thing, come up with a recommendation, whatever logic that it may be, but we can constrain those agents to a certain boundary, upper and lower limits, and do that on a percentage basis, do that on a rule basis, do it on a floating basis. But we can put those controls in on things that come into the environment in a way that others, are not able to do at this point. And we think we can scale faster and deliver the benefits faster than some of the other tooling that's out there that proposes some of the same language, but we think we can get there a lot faster and more predictably, and not have the CEO worrying about, are they going to destroy my data? Are they going to upset things? Am I going to expose information outside the company that I don't want to expose? That all can be controlled within our model. And so whether or not you use AI, within our context, you can still design that differentiation you want, and there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done just in that area before you ever get to some of the tuning that you want to do as well.
Are you guys agnostic when it comes to ERP commerce platforms, or are you kind of rolling out kind of those connectors, a bad word, but to those different ERPs and commerce platforms? And CPQ, I guess there's a bunch of systems in there, I guess you would say.
Yeah, we're agnostic in that sense because most of our customers at this point tend to have multiple ERPs and multiple commerce, and some of them have AS400s, some of them have even older systems or other proprietary systems. You have all the custom coding that's out there. And so we're saying, look, we plug into any of it, and it doesn't matter to us. Now, having said that, there's market share. SAP has a big part of the market share, and we have people like myself and others that have the SAP experience and know how to pull data out, put it back in to amplify the capabilities within that ERP.
Do you have an ICP when it comes to customers of what they look like? I mean, are there like specific industries that resonate? Are there certain size companies that resonate more? Like how do you look at that segmentation?
Yeah, I mean, long term, we think we can really be playing in any industry. But in the shorter term, just based on the customers that we already have, we're thinking med tech and pharma. We're thinking like MRO, manufacturing. We're thinking the wholesale side of really any kind of product around wholesale. Certainly my background, extensive experience in retail, which is where I started with all the different experiences over the years, working for the founders and other CEOs of Home Depot over the years and head merchants. So I've got a lot of understanding of that kind of complex world of DIY, where you have services, you have products, you have seasonal variations, you have people are trying to construct things, so you have to have a project view of life. You have special orders. We like things that are complex, so I suspect we'll go after, from a retail standpoint, we'll go after things that are the most complex, that aren't easily solved by other platforms. And then sort of the information side of things, whether it's publishing, information services, insurance, even banking. We see that as a big play where there's a lot of money being spent to try to solve this stuff, and yet there's a lot of hesitancy around AI, bringing it inside the fold, because of regulatory kinds of concerns and exposing of data. But those are the ones we're looking at out of the gate. That doesn't mean we're not going to attack lots of other ones as we go forward, because we don't have the constraint. It's really more of a go-to-market approach, in terms of where do you spend your resources and kind of double down on certain things. But we're certainly open to expanding that over time. And then from an ideal customer standpoint, large, complex global organizations, Fortune 500 or similar, we'll go into like $1 billion division typically, and then on our way to taking over multiple divisions in terms of enabling them, on the way to an enterprise play as we build it out.
Amazing.
And we do have a small RE Ops is a small startup company that I was talking about for terms of multifamily MRO marketplace.
Okay.
And we're a startup, so I mean it's not a constraint in terms of smaller companies.
Yeah, sure.
Our focus has been on the most complex places that have gaps and issues and challenges. That's where we're going, to where we can provide a solution very fast, in like 4 months from start to finish, a capability that they can start rolling out, and then build on that, over time, and add new capabilities. And people appreciate the speed. If you think of, the companies with done a lot of acquisitions, or if you think of even private equity that has a portfolio, maybe they're putting a few companies together, trying to do a roll-up play. Typically, they don't have the time or patience, given their horizon, to do an ERP consolidation across multiple entities, or to do a service bureau approach for multiple companies. Whereas with us, I mean, that's where we love to go. And whether you're providing a service across multiple entities and then you spin it off after you sell it, well, our stuff can continue forward with them and plug into whatever system they might have. Or if you've got multiple entities you're rolling up, we can plug and play with them in terms of pulling information out of the various systems that you might have. So you can provide that layer and do it at a speed that makes sense when you're trying to, maybe turn over that and sell it within like 3 to 5 years. So we're perfect for being able to get in, solve the issues, make money for them, contribute to the overall, and then contribute to when you do try to sell something, hey, you've got some really great capabilities that knit these companies together.
That's amazing. Rick, I think what I'd like to do is, communicate back with Andrew. I think even the three of you, even Rick, you yourself, Andrew, and Brian, even together on the next one would be great.
Yeah.
But let's.
Well, bringing Larry in too in terms of the.
Larry. We could even do. I don't know how many people we should have on this, but
yeah,
we could definitely have 4 or 5. It'd be kind of fun. Maybe I'll have someone else on with me too, to help me round robin it. I think there's so many interesting things here that I kind of want to explore a bunch of things. First of all, you have an amazing way with phrasing. You've named everything.
You know this.
I was part of the team that came up with PCM, product content management, back in the day at Hybris. So I always notice when people name things.
Yeah, there's probably, I don't know, I didn't really track them, but there's probably 10 to 15 phrases that are unique that were not in Google anywhere when I wrote them on the website.
That's amazing. I love it.
It takes a lot of time now though, because people have created so many phrases. So like digital value added is one. The no-code contextual modeling is another. The enterprise digital fabric and creating that as a category. I mean, that was pushing hard into this is the way it has to be in the future, to be able to bring these various systems together with this digital fabric. And it describes exactly what they've built. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that to really understand, okay, what have we built, and then how do we describe this differently than anybody else has described? And the ability to bring all that information together, and even the vortex, I'm not sure how familiar you are from an engineering standpoint, because I'm a German major, in accounting, so I've never studied engineering, but I got a lot of this from my MIT colleagues. But if you think of that vortex, it could either be a wormhole, where you're accelerating things through the wormhole, and for a wormhole, it's nice to be smaller and tighter, because the more broad you make it, like if we're an SAP going end to end, well, you make it broad, well, it collapses. If you think of it as a Bernoulli pipe or a Venturi tube in the middle, and liquid is pressing through there, it's the idea that it accelerates, even though there's less, it's higher velocity, but less volume going through that too.
Yeah.
And so then I think of that as the value stream going through the vortex. That's why we identify the things that are of most value, push them through there, and then when you get to the end, you have this accelerated digitalization. So it's not just an icon of some sort. It really has meaning for how we think about the focus that you want to have, and also the convergence of information from different sources, touch points, and it converges in the middle to be able to unite these things together.
Is it raining there?
Yeah, it's starting to rain a little bit on the roof.
You can hear it coming through.
And then the same thing for the vortex when I use it with B2B and B2C on the left side, from the video, where it's B2B is very complex, you got to deal with that. B2C is people want to go simple, and then in the middle, you're just trying to bring everything closer together. B2B2C, you're trying to bring manufacturer and consumer closer together, or D2C, and then C2B is really a passion I've had since the AI days 20 years ago. And people are doing it on the retail B2C side of things, where you have your own mall, and you have your own website for me. You generate an agent that goes out and curates for me. But in the B2B world, that's probably going to come in a little different manner. And I think by the time it gets there, we'll have solved that too.
Rick, this was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. We're definitely going to do another one real soon.
That was cool. Great to have a chance to talk to you, Justin. I appreciate your perceptiveness around things and how you nuance things and get me going.
Appreciate it, Rick.
All right, take care.
Manufacturers, distributors, leaders in the zone. If you're building B2B, this the podcast throne. The industry's heartbeat, we're setting the tone. Turn insights to actions, it's how empires are grown. We're talking change management, breaking resistance. Strategies so sharp, they redefine persistence. Customer adoption, it's more than retention. It's building a movement, commanding attention. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow. We bring news, big topics, insights to spark. From the boardroom's glow to the warehouse dark. Digital transformations, the path we're paving. Helping you lead through the change you're facing. This is more than a podcast, it's the industry's voice. Giving you the tools to make the right choice. No fluff, just facts, no hype, just action. The show where solutions are more than a fraction. It's the B2B e-commerce show, where the vision is clear and the strategies glow. From the top of the globe, we're the pros who know. Turn the volume up loud, it's time to grow.
This is your guide to the digital race. Practical advice, no time to waste. So tune in, gear up, and let's own the space. It's the B2B e-commerce show, the industry's base. The industry's base. The industry's